Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Amanda Rizzo. I am a senior attorney at Minsky, McCormick & Halligan. Thank you so much for joining us today for an overview of Know Your Rights in the United States, as well as an overview of some of the most recent policy updates in immigration now that the Trump administration has taken over. I'd like to also introduce my colleague, Aaron. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Aaron Lowy. I'm also a senior attorney here at Minsky, McCormick & Halligan, and I'm looking forward to sharing the information that we have, knowing that everything we're saying is subject to change if more executive orders are issued, but I'm looking forward to connecting with you all.
So just to tell you a little bit about our firm, Minsky, McCormick & Halligan is a Chicago-based immigration law firm founded in 1975. For over 50 years, our firm has been representing and advocating for immigrants in the areas of employment, family, and humanitarian-based immigration relief, and defending individuals in removal proceedings, also known as deportation proceedings. So thank you again for joining us, and let's go ahead and get started. First, we're going to take a look at some of the big updates that we have had. So to begin, Aaron, can you give us a little update on some of the important policy changes that we've seen this week since Trump took office on January 20th?
Yeah, absolutely. We're not going to cover everything. There have been so many orders and changes already, but we'll hit on a couple that we think people are going to be very interested in. I think the one that got the most press is the order about who is an American citizen. It's generally been accepted that if you're born in the United States, you're a citizen of this country, regardless of your parents' immigration status. So under this new order, they want to limit citizenship to people who are only born if in the United States, if one of their parents is a lawful permanent resident. After February 20th of 2025. So if you're already born before that date, you are a citizen according to this. Most importantly, 22 states have already sued along with other activist groups. And a federal judge has already stopped this order from taking effect. So for now, until something changes, and hopefully it doesn't, children born here will continue to be U.S. citizens regardless of their parents' immigration status. And there have also been several executive orders about immigration enforcement. So there have been new orders basically asking DHS to prioritize more people who've entered the United States without inspection, people who've been here unlawfully, people who have a final order of removal. Pretty much, anyone in those categories, even if you've never committed a crime, even if you've been here for a long time, you're still a priority for them to try to deport you. Another very scary thing is that they've expanded what they call expedited removal. That is basically like a fast track deportation. You're not entitled to see a judge. They just can deport you. And that used to only be people who were caught near the border and had been here for less than 14 days. But under law, technically, that can be really used for anyone in the country if they've been here for less than 2 years. And if you entered illegally or through fraud. And so now they're expanding it to anyone who's been here for less than 2 years and entered illegally or had fraud. And so this is a very scary order for many people, pretty much almost anyone who's been here for less than 2 years. And so we do encourage everyone to have proof with them that they've been here for more than 2 years. And if you have been here for less than 2 years, to exercise caution.
I think one of the important things to point out about this new rule is that it is for folks who entered the U.S. Without permission or with fraud. So a person who entered with a valid visa and overstayed isn't supposed to be affected by this rule. But like Erin said, we are encouraging all of our clients to gather the 2 years of proof. And that is something that we will discuss as part of our family safety planning step, which we'll cover later in our session. Something
And
else
just one more
that,
thing to note.
oh yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. People who've entered for the purpose of claiming asylum, I think those are, it's a little bit unclear how this order will impact them if they've already applied for asylum, but they've been here for less than 2 years. So that's something we're still trying to learn about. It hasn't really been clarified. So hopefully we'll be able to update you more, because we know a lot of people came in for that purpose and have already applied, and we want to see how this is going to impact them as well.
Something else that has changed is where ICE is allowed to arrest people. There was a long-standing policy under multiple administrations to protect sensitive locations like health clinics, churches, hospitals, other houses of worship, schools, and many other places like playgrounds, places where children gather, etc. Those places are all now available for ICE to use when they are trying to serve their warrants and arrest folks. Something important to remember is that everybody, and we will talk about this at length in a little bit, everybody still has constitutional rights in this country, regardless of their immigration status. That means that there are still rights for any immigrant in the US to be protected under the Fourth Amendment in what is called a private space. So if you are in school in a classroom, that's a private space, but the lobby is not. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Erin, do you want to tell us a little bit about what rights individuals have when they do find themselves in these locations and ICE appears? I kind of got it started for you already.
Sure. Give me. So, yeah, if you're in one of these areas, one of the problems is that ICE generally doesn't need a warrant in these areas, but you always do have the right to remain silent, and you don't have to talk to them. You don't have to answer questions. You don't have to give them anything. You have the right to tell them that, you want to see a lawyer. You don't have to show them any paperwork. And then also some states, like Illinois is one of those states, have certain laws and policies that prevent their local law enforcement from cooperating with federal immigration enforcement. Although unfortunately they don't prevent ICE from conducting their own enforcement actions. But I think your biggest right is your right to simply remain silent and not answer questions or provide documents.
Right. And so the difference between the public and the private spaces would be any place where a person of the public would be able to go, like a parking lot, the lobby of a hospital, maybe the threshold of your child's school, or the line of cars that people wait in to pick up their kids. Those are all like publicly accessible places. But once you get to the point of being in a patient's hospital room, or again, the classroom scenario, those places are still private, and ICE cannot just enter those spaces without a specific warrant with a specific person's name and the address of that location. So, Erin, moving on from this, I was going to ask you about the Laken-Riley Act, because there's been news of the passage of this new law. It looks like Trump will probably sign it, of course. What can you tell us about this new law and how it will affect our non-citizen clients?
Yeah, this is a pretty horrifying law, and I'm it's really shocking that so many members of Congress signed on to it, even Democrats. So this is about people who can be detained by immigration without the right to get a bond. So this applies to certain undocumented immigrants if they enter the country illegally. They've been arrested, charged, admit to committing, or even are suspected of having committed certain crimes, such as burglary, larceny, theft, shoplifting, assault on a police officer. Someone like that can be detained and ultimately deported, even if they've never been convicted of a crime. Just having been arrested or being under suspicion of committing one of these crimes is enough under this law where they can detain you, and no judge can give you a bond, and you have to just stay detained until your immigration process is over. So it's really terrifying that someone who's never even found guilty of anything could still be detained without bond. And, you know, that we expect that to result in racial profiling. We expect innocent people to be caught up in this. It's just really, it's very scary for people. And it's very shocking that this is happening in this country.
One of the things that worries me is that
the
when folks are like in groups, oh, sorry, Aaron, talking over you. One of the things that worries me is
No, that's
that,
fine.
you know, especially when I think about like teens who shop in groups, sometimes there'll be an instance where security or police will suspect one member of a group to have done something wrong, but because they can't figure out identities, sometimes everyone will get charged until the facts shift out and they can decide who to actually charge later and drop the charges for the rest of the group. This law would scoop up all those people in a group. And so these are the types of scenarios that come to my mind when I worry about how widespread this could affect our clients. So we just have to kind of, you know, keep our ears to the ground as the policy rolls out on how this is going to be applied, and we'll keep you updated via our blog and, just our regular communication with our clients. I would say the final big policy update this week. Oh, unless you had something else to say, Aaron.
I was just going to say the one thing we're not really certain about is whether this applies to arrests or convictions before this law passed. We would certainly argue that this law only applies for people who are arrested or convicted after the passage of this law. But we don't know if the government will try to enforce this on someone who's been arrested 10 years ago, even if they were found not guilty. Perhaps the government would say, well, you have an arrest, we get to detain you. So, this just feels like a very scary weapon the government can use.
There's still a lot
sorry,
we don't
Amanda,
know.
I interrupted you.
No, that's exactly what I was saying, is that there's still a lot we don't know. And so, I mean, it's still not even a law yet. It's still a bill. So we will learn more in the coming weeks on how this is going to be implemented. I think the last thing to really mention as far as significant updates that affect our clients who are in the United States right now would be the cancellation of certain parole programs. Some of our clients do sponsor their family members or friends who are coming from certain countries on these parole programs that were put in place by the Biden administration for Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans. Those parole programs are over now. USCIS has taken their website down on those specific pages almost the same day that the order was signed. So unfortunately, those parole programs are done. TPS and Uniting for Ukraine continue, and no changes have been made to those programs. So those are the updates right now. As the weeks roll out, I'm sure we'll have more, and we'll update our blog to keep everyone updated. For now, we're going to talk about Know Your Rights and how you can protect yourself and your family from some of these more aggressive policies that we now have in place. And all right. I believe I was going to start. So let's talk about immigration enforcement and who does what, just very briefly so we know some of the acronyms that we use. The Department of Homeland Security, down at the bottom left-hand corner of this graphic, is the agency of our administrative branch that oversees USCIS, the U.S. Border Patrol, and ICE. We'll be talking about ICE quite a bit in this particular presentation because they are the police force of the Department of Homeland Security, responsible for arresting non-citizens and also prosecuting them in immigration court. Our immigration court is part of the Department of Justice, called the Executive Office for Immigration Review. Sometimes we call that EOIR. And this is where immigration judges decide the cases of non-citizens who are in removal proceedings. And it also oversees the Board of Immigration Appeals, where a person can appeal their decision if they are ordered removed, also known as deported. Okay. These are the various badges that some of our law enforcement agencies use. You'll see that the Transportation Security Administration, the TSA, is on here. And we do just want to let you know that the TSA is in every single airport, and they are part of the Department of Homeland Security. And thus, this close connection can sometimes bring people under a little closer scrutiny when they're traveling, even domestically. Depending on your case, sometimes we do advise not to travel within the United States, just depending on how high risk a person is. And of course, these are the other badges for ICE, Customs and Border Protection, which we call CBP, and Homeland Security Investigation, HSI. So police officers of ICE sometimes will just have a badge that's, or a vest that says police on it. So if you are ever questioned by an officer that is merely wearing such a vest that says police, it is important to ask them, what agency are you with? What police department are you with? Because that might change what information you may exchange with them. Just to make clear that immigrants with past convictions and pending criminal matters are the highest risk at being placed in removal proceedings, as well as those with final removal orders or deportation orders. So let's talk about what to do and what not to do when you do encounter police. First of all, as we've mentioned, we really want you to invoke your right to remain silent whenever possible, because anything you say can be used against you. Oftentimes you may be in a position where you need to say your name. That often comes up when you are being pulled over in your vehicle. Of course, that's a little different. But we would advise you not to go into details about where you are from, where you were born, what your immigration status is, because all of those things can be used against you later. You can simply tell the police officer that you want to remain silent and speak to your attorney and to not be questioned after that. A couple things that we would want to remind you is that if you have been pulled over, you might want to have a trusted contact who you can call so that you can have them pick up your car so it doesn't get impounded. And memorize the phone numbers that you're going to need in an emergency. We're going to talk about this again at the end, but memorizing your trusted contact who has possession of your family safety plan and knows the caregivers that you've appointed for your children, plus your lawyer and your consulate. Those are the top 3 phone numbers to memorize. A big no-no on what not to do when encountering law enforcement is carrying false documents. This will just get you in much more trouble than needed be, because it is a federal offense to carry the documents that belong to someone else. Don't make excuses or lies about where you're from or where you were born. It's better to remain silent and just ask to speak with your attorney before you sign anything. Erin, do you want to talk about how to protect yourself in your home?
Yes, I would love to. Okay, I wasn't sure. I don't think I I can't control the PowerPoint, right, Joe?
You can just tell me when you want me to change the slide.
Okay. You can tell we didn't prepare this part of it.
We're very prepared.
Okay, so the first thing, I'm always bad at technology. This is just the story of my life. Okay, so previously we talked about the difference between a private and a public area. So obviously your home is a private area, and no one can enter that without your permission or a judicial warrant. So if someone shows up, whether they're ICE, law enforcement agents, you can ask them to show you a valid warrant. And if they don't have a warrant, you do not have to open the door at all. As you can see here, if you open it even a teeny bit, they can push their way in. So if they don't show you, you can ask them to slip a warrant under the door. But if they don't have one, you do not have to open the door. Next slide, please. So I guess I anticipated what I was going to say here. So if they say they do have a warrant, ask them to slip it under the door so you can look at it. And make sure everyone in your house knows this. Even if a child opens the door, that allows them to come in. So, and this applies to everyone, whether they're citizens or not. A lot of people live in homes where some people are citizens, some people are not. But everyone should know this. You do not have to open the door until you've seen a warrant. And if someone does try to force their way in, you should write down their badge numbers and try to get their license plate numbers to potentially report that. Next slide, please. Okay, so one thing that's very confusing about this is we've talked about a judicial warrant, and now there's something called an administrative warrant. They're two different things, and it's important to know the difference because ICE may show you something called an administrative warrant. That does not allow them to enter. They'll say they have a warrant, but this is where you need to look at it and see if it's a judicial warrant or an administrative warrant. A judicial warrant is actually signed by a judge who's not part of the Department of Homeland Security. An administrative warrant is just issued by the Department of Homeland Security and signed by an immigration officer. So what you see here is a sample of an administrative warrant. This allows them to detain someone they think might be breaking the immigration laws, but it doesn't allow them to enter someone's home or any other private space without their permission. To do that, they would need a warrant signed by an actual judge, which we'll show you on the next slide.
This is probably too small to see, so I'll skip past it, but they're just more examples of ICE arrest warrants and removal warrants, which if it's issued by the agency of the Department of Homeland Security, it's not a judicial warrant. So you can see that clearly on the top of these documents when you look at them.
Yeah. So judicial warrants, like I said, that's what they need to enter a non-public area. So it has to be signed by a state or federal judge, not an immigration judge, not an immigration officer. And it would tell them where they're allowed to enter. So again, if it doesn't have an address, if it doesn't have a location, they can't just use it to enter anywhere. So this judicial warrant would really have to give them authorization to enter a specific place or to confiscate certain items, but it has to be very specific. If the warrant they show you doesn't have the right address, they can't come in. Or if the warrant they show you only identifies certain places, you don't have to let them see any other places that's not included in the judicial warrant.
So, Erin, if an ICE officer holds up a person's deportation order that is signed by an immigration judge, is that good enough?
No, that still doesn't entitle them to enter your home. Now, if you leave your home and they arrest you, that's a different story. But if you are in your home, nothing aside from a judicial warrant allows them to enter. You do not have to open up. You do not have to let them in. So these are some examples of a judicial warrant. And so you can see here in the middle, it says United States District Court, District of Minnesota. So this is a federal warrant. It's issued by the district court in Minnesota. So it's not going to be issued by the Department of Homeland Security. And you can see where it says the word order. It says exactly what they're allowed to search. It says like whose property they're allowed to search. It's going to be very specific. It might have a case number. So if this is what they show you, then you do have to open the door, assuming they have your correct address on it.
This is just to show the image of the judge's signature, I believe.
Yes.
These are a little, the previous one is kind of like an older model, but these are, I think, more modern district court warrants. Okay.
But again, just to summarize, the very important thing is that if it doesn't look like it was issued by, if it doesn't look like one of those orders, if it just was issued by an immigration officer, the Department of Homeland Security, you do not, under any circumstances, have to open the door. And so, Amanda, I know you're going to talk about your rights in public spaces right now.
Yeah. And just reflecting back on the major changes that we've had this week, just remembering that a lot of public spaces that we think of generally are, again, the schools, the churches, the hospitals, synagogues, houses of worship. These places we kind of think in our head as a public space, but before they were protected as a sensitive location, and now they are not. So just as a reminder, as we talk about public spaces and the difference between, where you have an expectation of privacy and where anybody can just walk in. So that would be the definition of a public area where anybody can go. So think about lobbies, parking lots, the restaurant that is connected to a large office building. These places are open and available to anybody to walk in. In such a place, if you are stopped, remember you still have the right to remain silent. You don't have to ask any questions, and you can ask to speak to an attorney. But again, they don't need the warrant that we just discussed to approach you in a setting like this, because again, we're not in our home anymore. In your car, Aaron, I think you were going to take this one because this changes a little bit the scenario. It's not a home, it's not a public space, but you can still be pulled over for many reasons. So go ahead.
Right. And so, obviously, if you have a license or a state ID or a work permit, you should always carry that with you. It is very important, as Amanda said earlier, that you do not carry any false documents, because even carrying them, even if you don't show it to an officer, carrying them is a crime. And it could be a crime that has very severe immigration implications. So just do not have any fake documents with you. Next slide. Okay, so obviously you don't want to get pulled over anyways, but especially in these times, don't give anyone an excuse to pull you over. So just think about all the simple reasons that cops could use to pull someone over. If you have objects obstructing your windshield, hanging from the rearview mirror, if you have tinted windows that are darker than allowed, if you have headlights that don't work, or other lights in front that don't work, that's the basis to pull you over. Be sure that your license plate, that you have valid license plates, that your city sticker and insurance are up to date, and obviously obey all traffic laws. If you violate any traffic laws, you can be pulled over. And this should go without saying, do not under any circumstance drive under the influence of alcohol or any other drug. That's not just for immigration purposes. That's just, you don't want to do that. That could put yourself and other people in grave danger.
If I can add one more that just came to mind, I have seen this before, getting pulled over for extremely loud music. So maybe turning off those subwoofers in the trunk might be a good idea. because there are no precautions that we wouldn't want you to take right now. Being ultimately just very careful is the best option. And if you don't have a driver's license, it is the time to ask for carpooling options with friends, to get to work, coworkers to drive you, put aside an Uber fund, whatever is needed, because that is one of the key ways that I have seen in the past clients get picked up because of driving without a license.
All right, so if you are pulled over, what can happen is a local police officer could choose to call ICE, and we can get to that in a moment. But one thing to notice is that often it's not clear what agency the officer is from. The officer could be an ICE agent, they could be local police, they could be sheriff, they could be state police. And if they just say they're police, ask which agency they're from. Are they from a local department? Are they from immigration? And if they identify themselves as being from ICE or CBP or anyone in the Department of Homeland Security, you don't have to answer their questions. You don't have to provide any documents. Again, it's, you may want to give them your name, but other than that, you can always say that you need to speak to your lawyer before you answer any more questions. So if you are pulled over by local or state police, and you determine it's not an immigration officer, you can give them, you'll probably be asked to give them your name, your driver's license, your registration, your insurance. And if you don't have those things, you could be arrested for that, for driving without a license or insurance. If you are going to be arrested, you can certainly ask if you can park your car in a safe place, or have someone drive your car away just to avoid being towed. Importantly, note that police do not need a warrant to search your car. So if they pull you over, and then they may search your car and find something else. So just, obviously, don't break any laws, but just know that being pulled over for speeding or for running a red light could result in them searching your car. And if you have something in there that you're not supposed to have, that could be a further arrest or further crime that you could be charged with.
This might be an optimal moment to talk about the difference between state law and federal law regarding marijuana. I don't know if you want to bring that up now.
Yeah, that is actually.
I just think about, in the car. So.
Yeah. No, that's a very good point. So drug laws for immigration purposes are defined federally, and that's not the same as each individual state. So some states like Illinois might allow recreational marijuana or medicinal marijuana or certain other substances, and it could be perfectly legal in the state you're in. But obviously there's a difference between it being legal and then driving under the influence. But even just having it in your car, if then ICE is there and they see that you have this substance, even if it's legal in the state you're in or in your home state, it may be a ground to deport someone or place someone into deportation proceedings, because under federal law, it's not legal. Obviously, one thing to think about is if you're in one state where it is legal and you drive into another state where it's not legal, that could also be a state crime and could result in an arrest. So you just want to be very careful, and sort of, if you're thinking about using any substance that's legal in your state, just be aware that it might be illegal under federal law that could have very severe immigration consequences for you.
Especially if you have friends traveling with you, it's always something to ask. It's a risk you take when you're in the vehicle together.
Yeah, because Amanda, like you said, in another context, sometimes if one person could commit a crime or be suspected, but the whole group could be arrested. So if even if it's not yours, if you're in the car, they could arrest everyone until they determine whose it is.
Right. And oftentimes the police aren't going to just figure out everyone's stories right there and then. It might come later after everybody gets charged, and the criminal record begins then and there. So,
yeah.
Let's also talk about your rights at the workplace. This is aimed towards the subject of what happens if ICE raids the workplace, which means if ICE officers come to the workplace looking for undocumented workers who should not be working and want to arrest them. Advise not to run in such a scenario. It obviously looks like there's something to hide here. You don't want to obstruct ICE from doing their job, but at the same time, you don't want to make it look worse. So you don't want to tell any lies. So don't lie about anything, but also don't offer information you don't need to give. So don't tell where you were born or your immigration status. There is no need for you to answer such questions. On the contrary, we would urge you to remain silent as much as possible. And remember that in this context, you do have the right to film what's going on as a form of protection, because if the officers act improperly, go commit their own crimes in conducting the raid, it's better to have that documented so you can share that with an attorney later. And this goes not just for ICE raids, but for any interaction with police officers. So those digital videos or pictures can be used later and help you in case something went wrong and the raid or the arrest was conducted improperly. Again, don't interfere with the raid. Not even if someone is getting arrested or you think someone is using force. This will probably just make things worse. Just continue to document what you are seeing, and invoke your right to remain silent. Have your phone numbers, the key phone numbers memorized, because you will have an opportunity to make a phone call after you are booked if you are arrested.
And
yeah, go ahead, Aaron.
Just one thing to add before we move to the next slide. I just want to stress again that there's a difference between remaining silent and giving incorrect information. So, we do want to stress, do not say anything about your immigration status. But just to be clear, that does not mean that you lie and say you are allowed to be here. That is fraud. That could get you into major trouble. So just exercise your right to remain silent. Don't answer the question, but under no circumstances should you lie to an ICE officer or really any officer. That's just going to make things worse for you. And then one other thing that I wanted to add about these public spaces is that ICE recently indicated that they are also going to permit themselves to conduct operations at courthouses, especially criminal courthouses. So if you show up to court for your criminal proceedings, that could be a place where now they may be waiting for you. They didn't used to do that. So in addition to schools and hospitals and houses of worship, recently they made courts another one of those places that they can go. So if you have hearings, it might be worth thinking about whether those can be done over video. So you don't have to go to the court and potentially subject yourself to risk there.
Aaron, do you want to talk about what happens if you are arrested?
Sure. So obviously, if it's possible, say that again.
It's mostly what we just said, but I think it's really worth reiterating.
Yeah, absolutely. So we said to remain calm. We know that's not easy. It's going to be scary. But to the extent possible, you absolutely should remain calm. So as we just said, you never want to lie. You can remain silent, but don't lie. Don't give excuses. Don't give explanations. Do not say you're a citizen. If you're not, don't sign any documents that you don't understand. Don't talk about your immigration status or your legal status in general with anyone. You do have the right to speak with a lawyer. And that you also have the right to speak to a public defender if you're being charged with a crime. But you may not want to disclose your immigration status to your public defender. That's sort of something you should talk to your immigration attorney about first. And so, speaking of attorneys, you can always ask to speak to an attorney before you answer any questions. And we can go on to the next slide.
I think this is a slide I just wanted to put up so that if somebody wanted to pause it and commit some of these phrases to memory, it would be a good idea. These are all the same things that we just told you, but that's why this is up here.
Yeah, and I think that's great because, reviewing this and having it front of mind, especially if English is not your first language, you want to be able to communicate very clearly. And so these are very clear and direct things that you can tell an officer that they're supposed to respect.
Yeah, learning the phrases in English is key.
Yeah. Okay, so Amanda, you'll talk about, let's say your family member is detained or your friend. How do you find them?
Well, there is a website for this, but first you have to know what the person's alien number is. That is the official case number that is given to a non-citizen when they either apply for an immigration benefit with USCIS or they are put in removal proceedings. So anyone with a work permit has an A number. Anybody in immigration court has an A number. And with that information, you are able to look someone up in the ICE locator website. And that will help you to locate them in detention. You also need to know their name, country of birth, and date of birth in order to get that full information. Occasionally, you might be able to communicate with the consulate of that person's country of origin, but there might be privacy rules that restrict you. It depends on what your relationship is with that person. Further, if the person is detained, you're going to want to immediately start looking at whether bond is an option. Bond is actually a hearing that your loved one would have with a immigration judge to decide whether they can be released during the pendency of the removal proceedings. Granting the bond allows a U.S. citizen to stand in for the person and pay a certain sum of money to allow for their release. And there's a lot of proof and evidence that has to go into requesting bond. And unfortunately, not all individuals are even eligible for bond. It depends on why they were arrested. And it's a little beyond the scope of this particular presentation, but this is why it is so critical for you to name a person who is your primary contact in case of being arrested so that they have access to your documents, your personal information, your lawyer, so that they can help coordinate something like bond proceedings to try to get you out of jail, and memorize their phone number so that when, God forbid, in the worst case scenario, if you are arrested, you would be able to call that person and say, please call my lawyer if you can't get through to them. These are the documents, provide it to my lawyer, be my contact so that I can try to get out.
Before we move on, I'm just going to add a couple things to what you just said. So the website that you can see there to locate someone, often you can't find someone based on their name. It has to be spelled exactly. It has to match their documents. If there's a dash in the name that you left out, it's going to say your person's not there. Finding someone with an A number is much easier. But so if you try to look by someone's name and date of birth, there's a good chance they're not going to show up, because if their name was misspelled or for any other number of reasons,
happens all the time.
They may not show up, but it doesn't mean that they're not there. In terms of your friends who you might be, your contact on the outside, I can't stress enough how important it is that they like Amanda said, have your attorney's number, whether it's our office or any other attorney, and have your documents. Because as an attorney, we've had experiences where someone calls us and says, my brother's detained, and they have no documents, and we don't know anything about them. And even though we're attorneys, we don't have access to just all of their criminal and immigration documents. So we need those documents. And so make sure that your family member knows to send those to whatever the attorney is so they can start working on the case right away.
And that is one of the reasons that detained cases are the hardest cases, is that communication wall. This is just a very basic advisal. If you have ever been served a notice to appear, that's an NTA in shorthand, from ICE calling you to immigration court. You may have received it in the mail. You may have received it when you entered the United States because you didn't have a visa for whatever reason. If you were ever served such a document telling you that you are in immigration court, this is the website that you would use, or the phone number, and entering in that A number, case number, to look up where your case is at. When is your next hearing? Has that hearing date, time, and location been changed? Has the immigration judge ordered a decision? You know, this is the page that you would look to find out the latest about your case. And there is a Spanish version of that website available as well. Oh, and as a reminder, we have been getting this question recently just because of the fear that is spreading throughout the community. Is it safe to go to my immigration court hearing? And the answer would be, you need to go to your immigration court hearing, because if you do not, you will simply be ordered deported right then and there. And then you would be at even higher risk of removal because you have an open removal order ready for ICE to execute, and they can deport you then at any time. So you would want to keep going to your court hearings to fight your case. Do not skip. We covered this, so I'll skip that one. Okay, Erin, would you like to discuss my favorite topic, which is creating a family safety plan or emergency plan, whatever you want to call it?
Absolutely.
What it
But
is.
just before we get there, just one thing to add, because of the consequences of missing a hearing, you may not get a second chance. The judge could just order you deported. It is very important that immigration court have your correct address. So if you move, there is a way to update immigration, update the court. If you don't do that, if they send a letter to your old address telling you have court and you don't get it, the judge can order you deported, even if you didn't mean to miss it. You just forgot to tell them you moved. So it is incredibly important that you keep you keep the court informed of your changes in address. We can move on to the emergency plans. I just wanted to mention that one thing. All right, so you want to have an emergency plan in case the worst happens. So you want your plan to be in writing, and that you want to make sure that everyone knows what to do. There's a lot of things to plan for. You're going to want to make sure that someone knows to pick up your children, someone knows to be an emergency contact, who's going to take care of your property, who's going to take care of your house. Register your child's birth with your home consulate. Make sure that whatever documents you need, whether they're immigration, whether they're criminal, whether they're family court, make sure they're ready and they're in a safe place. And make sure that the people who are part of your plan know where that safe place is. Memorize the phone numbers for 3 family members or friends, so that if you're given a phone call, you have 3 people that you can try to call right away. I would not advise calling your lawyer, because the lawyer may not answer the phone right away, especially if it's after hours. Your friend can always call your lawyer. So make sure that your friend or family member are the people that you call, and also have your list of important phone numbers with you, including your consulate. And getting involved with local community organization is always always important as a way of kind of pushing back and asserting rights.
And
I don't
staying
know,
in the
Amanda.
know.
Yeah.
It's first, yeah, for knowing updates and just being involved is the best way to keep your pulse on the community, other than staying in touch with your attorney.
So here are just some things that we would recommend including in your plan. Just kind of a sample, but obviously it could be different for each family. So the first thing is, what about your children or family member? If you're detained, immigration may not care that you have children in school. So make sure that you have an emergency contact or a family member or friend who knows to pick up the kids from school and who can explain to them what happened. That's going to be step number one, just in terms of everyone's safety. After that, you'll want to be in touch with your attorney. That could be through your family member, or your attorney might be able to schedule a call with you once they find out. You'll want the school to know, like your children's school to know, so that they may expect someone else to bring your children. They may reach out to someone else instead of you, but they may not be able to do that if you don't first inform them that now your friend or now your sibling or now your parent is going to be the one in charge of your children. And having a family member detained, especially a parent, is really scary and traumatic for children. And so having therapy or counseling or other support for your children is extremely important to try to minimize the impact that having a parent detained can have. Obviously, they're going to be impacted, but counseling or other supports is a really good way to help get your children through this.
And this probably seems super daunting, like what goes into the plan? Do I write it down? Do I save it on the computer? All that. We have template plans that we have created for you to fill. You can fill it by hand. You can print it, fill it by hand. You can type it in. We have both types available for you to use. And then I actually would recommend having it printed in a folder with all of the specific documents that you need to support the plan. And again, there's a checklist of all the documents we recommend you collecting right there in the template. So feel free to use this guide from us. Contact your attorney at MMH so that you can receive one of these templates and get started on it, because there's no time too soon to prepare this, because it's not just filling out a document. It's contacting the school, making sure that they have authorization forms filled out for your primary caregiver, for your kids. There's little things that need to be done. You might want to consider also powers of attorney, which Erin will get to in a minute. So I'll skip through some of these specific lists of data that need to go into this plan, just because this is part of our template that you can access. If you're viewing this on YouTube later, you can pause the video, take a look at it. But these plans are very information dense, and that's so that your primary contact can fill your shoes while you're detained. You might not even have some of the contact information that you need, so take the time now to gather it and put it together in one place, including copies. This is not a place to put original documents, mind you, but copies of birth certificates, copies of passports, and that sort of thing. Okay.
And not to be scary, but your detention could be a couple of days. Your detention could be months. If the worst happens, you may not be released from detention if you are ordered deported. And so your plan should take into account all of those possibilities. Don't think of this as, it's just someone who's going to take over for a couple of days. Hopefully that's all it is, but you have to plan for something much worse. So with that in mind, a couple of things that we're recommending here is you may want to get a power of attorney so that someone can serve as a temporary caregiver for your children. Your children may need medicine, doctor's appointments, being enrolled in school. You want someone temporarily to be able to do that. Guardianship is something that's more long-term. That's a much more formal process in family court. That's not something that should be done in advance, and it can be done after the fact if a parent is deported. But it's something to think about if your child is going to stay here and you're going to, and you're going to be apart. And then the most permanent is custody. That could really give someone else basically full rights to care for your child and full responsibility and liability for everything about your child's care. So these are sort of the different stages, depending on what sort of length of time we're talking about.
And those long-term solutions can be done even if in that very sad worst case scenario, if a person is deported, these long-term solutions can be handled from outside of the United States. We review custody orders all the time in state court in the United States regarding custody from parents or other guardians abroad. So these things definitely happen even without the physical presence of the parent.
So powers of attorney are also relevant to your property. You may want to have someone who's able to be responsible for your assets, if you have a vehicle, if you have a home, if you have any other bigger sort of property, someone needs to be able to handle that. It may be silly, but if you have a bank account and no one can access it, or you have a safety deposit box in your bank account that no one can access, you want to have someone who is able to access and take care of your property over an extended period of time.
So this last piece is really more of a warning about trying not to induce unnecessary panic. So don't share information on social media when you don't know what the truth is yet. This is specifically true for suspected raids, rumors, things like that. Limit how much you get involved in this type of rumor mill passage because it's unhelpful and just creates panic in the community. That was just something I wanted to throw in at the end. We did receive one comment before we close. I did just want to answer it because it's a pretty simple question. Someone on YouTube asked, they have a deportation order, but their U visa is still pending. So what can I do now? The one small glimmer of hope that I had this week was that the policy to not deport those with a pending U visa, pending T visa, pending VAWA, or pending SIJ petition is still in effect. So this policy of protecting victims is still in place, even if the person has a deportation order. This is not a guarantee. It's just a policy that ICE has had for some time. Typically, over the years, we have not seen those folks get deported once while they have such a petition pending. Again, not a guarantee, but that policy was not rescinded this week. And I was looking for it very closely. So hopefully that will continue. That small protection will continue for the victim clients that we have. So just to summarize, this video will be available on YouTube to watch and rewatch and share with those that you would like to, get an idea of know your rights, how to protect your family, yourself, and to learn a little bit more about the recent changes in immigration policy in the U.S. We will be offering the same presentation in Spanish at 3:30 p.m. Central Time. So if it would be better for you to watch it in Spanish or watch that recording, that will also be posted to all of our social media. Please do stay tuned to our blog. We're updating it regularly with the latest updates in U.S. immigration policy as we learn more facts about how the policies, laws, and rules are going to be implemented. Stay in touch with us, your attorneys, and please don't hesitate to contact us with questions. Erin, did you want to say anything else?
I think just to echo everything that you said, this is a scary time, and we're here to support you as best we can. Don't hesitate to contact us, or if you have a different attorney, your attorney. Um, Please try to stay on top of whatever information you can. We're, as Amanda said, we're updating our blog because things keep changing, and we expect things to keep changing. And what is true now may not be true in 6 months. So try to stay as informed as you can through whether it's, reading blogs online, your attorneys, local community groups. That's the best way to, keep to feel empowered as best as possible. So we hope everyone stays safe. We hope everyone also stays warm. It's a little chilly out there. And we're always here. And yeah.
Thanks for joining. Bye.
Bye, everyone.